It's been a big numbers game for the markets lately with several economic reports to digest. Ag Day's Michelle Rook looks into the impact on ag.
Joining us with today's market analysis is Arlan Suderman with StoneX Group. Arlan, we've had a lot of information from an economic standpoint thrown at the markets. GDP, second quarter, we've had the Fed raising interest rates. What does all this mean for agriculture? What are you watching?
Well, for one thing, it was good to see the outside markets calm down last week. That allows the grain and oilseed markets to trade the fundamentals more rather than just getting whipsawed based on money flow and fear and panic, which we've seen so much of lately, and I'm sure we're going to see again. And that allowed them to focus on the weather market. And because of that fear factor, we had seen the funds liquidate so many commodities, the prices got cheap, and they suddenly said, this story's still there. We still need a hedge against inflation, and now we can buy in at a lower price. So that was beneficial to them. But inflation is with us to stay. I've heard a lot of talk about inflation. Oh, it's in the back rearview window because commodities have fallen so much, and so our inflation problem is behind us. But look at just what gasoline prices did last week, up over 50 cents from the previous week on the futures. You talked about what soybean prices did, corn prices going up. We're seeing many of the commodities come back again as they refocus on the supply and demand fundamentals. The structural issues behind this inflation is still in place. We haven't fixed that. We've done very little to withdraw money supply. In the PCE data that came out last week, we saw personal consumption up over 1% over the last quarter. Even though income's down, we saw wages and employee expenditures, wage inflation essentially up 5.1% year on year in the last quarter. So the inflation story is still there, and the funds are starting to realize that and come back into the commodities to hedge against it.
Do they come back in like they were before or not?
Oh, that's the key that I'm watching. We saw a lot of index fund liquidation. The CFTC data is always delayed. We are seeing evidence of them starting to come back in. Will they come back to the level they were? That's going to depend on the economic data coming forward and how these outside markets behave. But at least we're focused now on some of the fundamental factors, which I think producers and end users would prefer that they focused on.
Absolutely. It was really frustrating to watch the disconnect. Thanks so much for joining us. Arlan Suderman with StoneX Group. More Ag Day coming up.
Contact Arlan Suderman by email at arlan.suderman@intlfcstone.com.